Perth Linux Users Group, talking Linux and open source.
Yes, I'm Leon. That's me up here. I have GitHub and I write Perl. So EventStreamr is written in Perl, but I guess I moved to Perth in about 2006, and Alistair pestered me for about 3 years to join Plug, which I did in 2010. Which around that time, James Bromberger and a few of the others like Jason and Ewan and started the AV project, which I sort of quickly joined. Now we were running off lots of old donated hardware, which hopefully we've gotten rid of most of it, but it was old laptops. No, we didn't have any laptops. They were all big clunky desktops, which we sometimes had to lean the right way to get to work. Had weird Firewire cards and all sort of different installs of different operating systems. It was quite a mess. So James and a few of the others, I think I was a little bit involved, started the process of a Lottery West grant. Put together a budget, hardware, and sort of benefit to the community and all that sort of stuff, the process to get that grant, which was successful. And since then, we've had a lot of talks, which you can't really read, but it starts with clustered file systems and coding with Rusty Russell, which was a big event, which was really cool. And a bunch of other talks we've done, including an NBN panel discussion, and then a few of us got together and went to LCA 2013 to see how you do this stuff on a large scale, which was interesting. Interesting to say the least, because a lot of the hardware was in the same sort of stuff as our old donated hardware, sort of disparate systems and no central management, no central control, and a lot of us running around going, it's broken, and responding quickly to that. And then we had the crazy idea of running a conference in Perth, which Luke sort of put the bid together with a few of us others, and we were like, oh yeah, it should be interesting, and they'd given it to us, which is really cool, but we didn't really have the software to centrally manage all of our AV. So in the months before the conference, Luke and a few of the others and I got together, and we sort of started working out what we wanted to write and what we wanted to do to make this process a lot easier. And that's where EventStreamr came to life. So what is it? I get asked this a lot because people go, oh, does it stream? And I'm like, well, not really. Does it do events? Kind of. But really, it's just a fancy process manager with a REST, like, I'll use that term loosely, API, which you can use web calls to make it do things like start and stop things and update configuration, and which gave us the ability to see the whole conference. And with the intention of it being scalable from our local lug level to obviously a big conference. And why did we spend all that time? It's back to seeing what we saw at LCA 2013, was that when you've got a lot of systems out there and you want to see what they're all doing and wanting to update config, and someone calls up and says the twin pack's not working, having the ability to see in real time and make changes to config is really beneficial. I mean, there's things like Puppet and Chef and all those other sort of big projects, but we wanted something small that's easy enough to install for any lug and doesn't require a big learning curve. So there's a few concepts that we sort of built this around. Is that every single device is a station. It could be better named, but that's what we chose, and has a bunch of different roles that it can have, from ingest for cameras and audio, video for Linux devices, those kind of things. The mixer, which is DV switch, where everything comes into and you live mix it, and streaming, recording, and syncing for syncing files back to a central system. Come on, mouse. It doesn't like me. So the design we come up with after seeing different network troubles and different things that could go wrong at a conference was, well, not so much network troubles, but central file server troubles. The network's always awesome at conferences. Each room had to be independent, so that if anything went wrong, someone tripped over the main network cable, central storage dies, we're on the end of a really flaky link, or, as in LCA 2015, one room had no link to the network, so had to run independently. So that was why we wanted to design this to be independent. And where possible, when needed, to be centrally controllable. When things go wrong, like kicking out a firewire cable or a camera being turned off, it needs to restart itself. The issue reporting is important, and be easy to configure, deploy, and maintain. So we achieved in version 0.1 each room to be independent, as you can see up there. However, wasn't easy to configure, wasn't easy to deploy, or easy to maintain. Which
actually on the easy to deploy, I think it was easy to deploy, given that we had like a stable system that we could image and push it out, and it would take less than 5 minutes to machine the import machine. You're talking about ongoing maintenance.
Yeah, so Jason's pointed out for LCA 2014, we had a method that worked and was easy to deploy for us, but for the average person wasn't really easy, and it was very, very conference specific. So our little config wasn't going to work for anything but LCA 2014. So whilst we had a method, it wasn't really a long-term solution. Now, that doesn't show up on the display very well, but that is the main logic in version 0.1 of the process manager. It's about 200 lines of triple and quadruple nested logic blocks that sort of interdepend on each other, which is really, really difficult to maintain, really difficult when things go wrong, and just difficult in general. Also, I love JSON. It's a great thing for serializing data, but it's not really for humans to read. And I constantly found when we're under the pump that that's not valid. And it's not immediately obvious why. And there's an extra comma and 1 comma missing. Anyone found it yet? Exactly the problem, which is that you spend hours and hours, you're tired, you're not seeing the screen right, you're busy at a conference. That's just really far too hard. So the list at the end of LCA 2014 was that it was not easy to configure, not easy to deploy, not easy to maintain. It was hard to debug, hard to extend, complicated, pretty easy to break if things didn't go right, and no tests and lots of bugs, and we all love bugs. So we were a bit stuck post-conference because it needed a large block of time to sort of fix this. So we ran with it at Plug for a while, all of last year in fact, because of the time investment required to make any changes, because you needed to have all the kit together, you needed to have it all plugged in so you could test everything all at once, because the only way to test it was to run it. And if you didn't have everything, then you couldn't, you know. So I wasn't planning to attend LCA 2015, but some circumstances changed, and I got a bit of spare time before the conference, which led to me having some time to work on EventStreamr, which then led to Tim Ansell saying, "Hey, do you want to come to 2015?" And I'm like, "Cool." So I had a lot of ideas I'd been thinking about last year on what I want to do to change EventStreamr and sort of make it more maintainable. So that 200 line logic block is right there in about, I don't know what that is, 50 lines, but it's all the logic for the process and how to restart it, stop it, and all the things that it needs to do is just that. And anything else is abstracted away from the core logic. So you can fit it all on one screen, you can see exactly what's happening, and it has some comments, which is good. And also the main, this app EventStreamr process is a Mu package, which all the other processes in EventStreamr extend. So if we want to change the logic of a process, we change it here, and it changes it for every other package that extends it. And I have an example here. So up the top we have just the standard boilerplate for Perl, a bit of a description of the process, and it has some mandatory bits and pieces like the command, which we can either have as a default or we can use this builder method that we've got here. In the original design, you could have provide override commands for the different commands, which we actually haven't used yet. So I don't know whether I'm going to keep that long term, but it was something I carried over from point 1. And now we have tests. And we like tests. It means we can hack away at things and change things. And when the tests fail, we know we've broken something. When the tests pass and it doesn't work, means we don't have enough tests. It's also now Sipan installable. So Sipan for non-Perl people is sort of like apt-get. for Perl. It's been around for quite a while. There's a bunch of different ways you can use to install it. My personal favourite is Sipan M, which we have a talk that refers to it. Paul Fenwick did in 2011, May 2011, which covers things like Sipan M, and is on our YouTube channel. It also has a main executable which you can get help for. So it's a lot of progress from where we were before. And a configuration wizard, which isn't complete, but is you can at least sort of get up a single station working with this, which I did this on my machine at home, and I have an Oculus Rift, so that's the camera from that, some crappy USB cam, and a USB microphone, which it's found automatically. Okay. And a central place for configuration. Before it was just part of a Git repository that you cloned, and then you sort of copied an example configuration file to the right place and named it the right way, and it picked it up. Now it's automatically generated from the wizard, and obviously a log file that you can watch and see what's happening. Okay, so with the rewrite, refactor, I won't use rewrite because there's a lot of the same code just sort of massaged in a much nicer manner. A lot more modular design. Everything's broken out into separate packages, so if you want to change the config, you can change the config package. You want to change the status code, change that. It's all separate and tests for each of them. Easier to maintain. I did a lot of things at the conference, some of which I cherry-picked for here, but some of which for LCA 2015 they wanted specifically to work a specific way, which I was able to do with the new layout of the code. Easier to debug. Tests. We've got continuous integration with Travis CI, and coveralls, which tells us how much code we've got covered. So we have a new list of things that need working on now. As far as the code goes, we need more tests. It'd be nice to have that at like 99, 100%. The status code is sort of just lifted from 0.1, and I'm not entirely happy about it. And I probably should explain status code a bit more. It's every single device has a status or a state it can be in, and that's transmitted to the central front end or orchestrator. We're not too sure about our naming of it yet. Where all that's compiled, which I'll show you later. Date calculation doesn't happen on the fly at the moment. It sort of remembers the date from yesterday when the date changes. You restart the process and it picks up the new date, which is sort of how we've been getting around it until now. Role calculation, we have the mixer ingest, those sort of roles isn't calculated post start of the process, so that'd be nice if that was on the fly. There are a couple of edge cases where the daemon will silently fail, which is not desirable. But one of them being that if you've got an ALSA device configured, and if the ALSA device isn't present, it just goes nut and crashes instantly and doesn't tell you that it's done that. All minor things that I've documented as known problems. And speaking of which, we need more documentation. And probably not just documentation that I've written, documentation that's contributed by other people who are not me, who don't make assumptions about oh yeah, I'm going to write this out because this is how it works, and then someone else reads it and goes, what? I don't even, because I'm sure there's a lot of that in the documentation. It also currently requires a understanding of how the underlying infrastructure hangs together, which is fine if you're one of the AV guys that are, or team members rather, that have been working on all this stuff for the last few years. But when our end goal is reached, we wanted to say, hey, MLUG, I think they're called, here's a kit. Start streaming your talks, getting them on YouTube. Have those sort of processes in place so that it's more than just here with the Perth Linux users group with our expertise, or Sydney users group with Tim Ansell's expertise. It'd be really nice if we got to the point where here's some documentation, go for your life, and have, I don't know, Linux user groups around the world doing this, and maybe beyond Linux user groups. That'd be a nice place to be in. So what can you do? Well, there's a few things. Volunteer for AV. It'd be nice to share this knowledge so that maybe even all the plug members have experience on operating cameras, mixing, setting up, packing down, so that, you know, when an opportunity to do something like the away streaming of their annual general meeting or other things, that it's not just the same people attending. And also the hardware research, looking for different video, HDMI to USB devices, or getting that all stuff working, is important too, because there's only a few of us at the moment that do it, and we get sort of saturated with trying to get this sort of stuff working, getting the equipment in a good state. So there's plenty of different jobs that you can do, and sort of scratch whatever itch that you're interested in. Another thing is GST switch. Firewire is what we currently use. It's standard definition. It's old. You can't buy the hardware anymore. All the cameras we got for 2014 were second-hand off eBay, which Jason spent hours scouring for. Often from America, which we had to get a particular version so we could flash with PAL firmware. The twin packs that we use for capture are VGA, which is horrible. Often doesn't work. Is especially painful if you're a Mac user, because Macs think they know everything and go, you want it this resolution, and the twin pack goes, no. And they're discontinued, and when they were available, they're like over $1,000, so they're really expensive. So all of that, we're in this period of time where we're relying on old equipment. We've got a bit of a firmware bug with our laptops, where the Firewire cards that we use are not hot pluggable, so you have to reboot them if you bump the card, and which happens all the time, and that's really annoying. Fixed with current kernels, but there's another problem. DV switch doesn't work on anything newer than about Ubuntu 13.10. It seg faults as soon as you poke a device at it. And so we're also stuck with DV switch, which is not really maintained anymore. It was written over 10 years ago by a guy who's since left the project. So it's sort of stagnated quite a degree. So that's another issue, is that we're stuck in this land of limbo of running, you know, a 2-year-old operating system near 2-year-old, so it's going to stop receiving updates soon because it's not an LTS. Software that's not maintained anymore. Hardware that's not available. You know, we're in this really crappy situation. So the sooner GSC Switch, which is a project founded by Tim Ansell, is operating, the sooner we can move to HDMI capture devices, full HD streaming, full HD capture. All those wonderful things become a reality when that's finished. And that needs people to try it. There was a lot of work done before LCA 2015 to get that closer, and it now builds and you can run the demos, but it needs work on the user interface. But if you've got, if you know GStreamer, you can throw GStreamer commands at the server and they will appear on the device. So, you know, if we can get the UI working, then EventStreamr can just sort of package up the firing of devices at it, because they're just static commands, and we can have this world where we're not relying on Firewire anymore. Because Firewire, yeah, it does my head in. Oh, I've gone too far. What's happened? Right. And lastly, EventStreamr, which, you know, it's been a bit of a project for me, and I don't mind continuing to hack on it, but I would appreciate someone else attempting to follow the documentation and then raising GitHub issues saying, how did you even get that to work? Someone actually making suggestions for the documentation would be amazing as well. And if someone else can actually use it, well, it'll be even, you know, better. Because I can, I arrive and I do bits and pieces, and then it works, and then when I'm not around, everyone else is sort of like going, well, we plug it in and it's supposed to just work. Why isn't it just working, Leon? Bug reports, they'd be awesome. There's lots of bugs, and there's probably many that I don't know are there. And even better, patches. Patches are very, very welcome. And I guess I probably should attempt a live demonstration of what it is. And I don't know how well we'll go, but this is the front end or orchestrator, where you would see a room or a bunch of rooms, but we've only got one on this test, and stations. And stations will have configured devices and configuration you can put in with mixers, streaming, record paths, and all those sort of things. And I don't know which screen this is going to show up on. Oh, there we go. And there we go. That's got me. So that's what is supposed to happen. You press start and that happens. And that is, in theory, that's what happened for most of the conferences. And I actually had some comments from some of the AV team members that, hey, the phone's not ringing that much. Because when, you know, someone does this, you get the status of things going wrong, and it comes back. And the same if you kick out a Firewire cable and you plug it back in and go, oh my god, it comes back. And that's the theory. So if you stop, I press F11, it's disappeared out of my list of things there. And questions? Have we got the microphone? Cool. I don't know if you're probably all stunned in silence of.
I looked at the TV stream stuff. The DV stream a while back after seeing you guys at an event, and realised that the equipment is quite hard to find and quite expensive. I guess if anyone wants to get in on that, is there gear that you guys have available for that, for testing, if people want to contribute?
Well, I'm doing this with my laptop and a video for Linux device, so it will work with just any old piece of hardware and any old USB webcam. I did all my testing with a really, really ancient little LifeView RoboCam that I bought in 1996. It didn't even register the name of the device. It just had the ID, and it worked. That's how I did all the development of it. I actually didn't have any working Firewire hardware until like 3/4 of the way through writing EventStreamr, which what it was all about.
And just add to that, we've got station kits which theoretically can run the whole thing, that have the camera, the Firewire card, and I don't think people would be too opposed to giving that out to people who want to play, so giving people a kit and they can play about with and develop against that. So
yeah, and the kits can be imaged pretty easily and brought back to a known state. Like Luke and I did 2 machines today, and it took 5 minutes to dump the image, run the config script. So even if you really mess it up, just make sure you get here early before a talk. We'll re-image it and get on with our lives, and that's the whole point of it. And when it hooks up and you've got the right host name, it'll go and get its configuration. You don't even need to have the right host name. It will. The MAC address is currently the unique identifier, which I'd like to change to something else, probably a proper GUID or something like that. But it uses that identifier and asks for its config from the controller. So once we've got it configured, you can re-image it, run the host config script, and then it'll pick up its new original config again.
Any video for Linux camera will do, so it will perfectly well run on a Raspberry Pi with its own camera or with the USB camera. If we could make an image booting for that, that'd be really handy.
Well, in theory, it should just work on a Raspberry Pi. It's on Sipan. There's no hard dependencies, I don't think, but it depends on the. There are some.
At least for the ingest.
Well, it's Perl. Perl's available on ARM, and I've written lots of stuff on. I often, with my stuff at home, because I've got some Raspberry Pis, I do all my development on a x86 64-bit machine, and then I deploy it on an ARM platform, and it just works. So there's no architecture dependencies. From my Sipan testers reports until I turned off BSD, Windows, and HPUX, none of those platforms worked in the tests, and I only really care about it working on Linux. If someone wants to provide patches for it to run on Windows, I'd be very impressed, because the things that I do to get devices and stuff that I have tried to do on Windows, because I do a bit of Windows Sys Admin in my job, it's very difficult. So I'd be impressed if someone wrote a Windows port and provided patches that passed tests. Any other questions?
So you say that it'd be great if people started helping out a bit, sort of got involved with it. Whenever I come to these events, there's so much equipment flying around, and it's very hard to know where to jump in. How would I jump in to start helping out?
Well, that's one of the things we need to do, is pair back our equipment to kits. And my sort of pipe dream is to have a kit that lives in a bag like this, so that you can rock up if you're going to an event for plug. You bring this bag, and you've got a laptop, you've got a camera, you've got network cable, firewire cable, power board. All of that would comfortably fit in here. It takes up to a 17-inch computer. Can take. I've got my camera in here, my SLR, and I've had an SLR, one of the DV cameras we've got, a bunch of other stuff in here with all my own stuff up here and my laptop, so it certainly can fit all the gear we would need for a station. So I have this vision that we'd have, 3 kits like this, plus, say, an audio mixing kit, and we just rock up to an event with these bags, take our kit, put it down. It's got space for a tripod. I don't know why that was so hard to unleash from my brain, but space for a tripod, because that is literally what people who travel around doing audio video recording for a living take with them. So that's sort of my dream, is that we don't have these plastic tubs, we don't have a mountain being stored at someone's house, because we almost never use it all, and we tend to get by without it. So maybe if we know a particular venue or a particular big event is going to need 50-meter extension leads, we can keep that in a box somewhere, but we probably don't need to bring that every time. Hey.
One of the things I've noticed, having been at a few of these now, is that you suffer a lot from cable problems, connections, things not working. Basically because you've got a lot of gear scattered around. Do you put any thought into something like a small carry rack or something like that with a handle, everything pre-assembled with just the minimum number of connections? Basically, I could see something like a few camera inputs, everything else attached to one box that never moves and shouldn't create problems because of that.
Yeah, the idea of a nice big AV rack that you wheel into a venue is great. I actually really like that concept. The problem you have is they're big. They tend to be big and bulky and hard to carry around, and a lot of our members come into, especially this venue, on the train, so that can be a little unwieldy, and we want to actually get away from that sort of thing. Whereas, in the future, hopefully, we don't need laptops. We can use like a EventStreamr is good enough that you just plug it into a network, and use like an Intel NUC, which is pretty small, and you have a HDMI to USB and a camera and a tripod. You're going to have these cables that you need to set up, so that it should be a lot neater. A lot of the troubles we've had, the trouble we had tonight is that we had hardware failure. Our mixing desk has given up the ghost, so we're actually using the onboard audio capture, which is not ideal and very noisy, but better than nothing. And if we have our kit simplified, we shouldn't have going, oh, is this network cable working, or is this firewire cable working? We know that this kit has this stuff and it works, and we put it here, and we're not chopping and changing different bits and pieces. So that's probably a long-winded answer to your question there.
It's another point, again, looking at the way you've done this over the last few years, is have you thought about using something Wi-Fi based just for the connections between the machines?
Yes, and I'm not opposed to the idea, but due to lack of time and we haven't really because we've been fighting a lot of other battles. Like we didn't have EventStreamr a few years ago. We were manually setting up commands to run, and the twin pack. I hated it, like with a passion of 1,000 burning suns a few years ago, because it dies. Like, not the device itself, but you change the input, it drops a Firewire connection, combined with DV grab, which hangs when the Firewire drops. So you get to this point where you plug it back in and nothing works. So you've got to go and manually restart this command. And at 2013, the twin pack's not working. You run over there and you check everything, and just restart it and it comes good. And then they have a Mac and they change something and it redoes its VGA connection. Firewire drops. And that was one thing we noticed at LCA 2014. We didn't have any problems with Firewire and the twin packs, is that it could see that the Firewire connection would drop and just try to restart it. And as soon as you got an input again, it'd come back up, light up the Firewire, and restart it and got on with its life. So it wasn't an issue for us. So I've sort of made peace with the twin pack device to a degree.
I'd like to add actually that the equipment that we have right now, the cameras, we got these ones in particular because they were at the end of, I guess, the end of life when it came to Firewire, and they were like amongst the best cameras in terms of quality for Firewire, but they also have HDMI out. So they straddle the old world of Firewire and the new world of HDMI. So our cameras are still usable once we have an HDMI solution. And really, the issue there is capture. And Tim Ansell, who's an Aussie who's keen to get HDMI capture going, has tried to build his own HDMI capture device. That's still an ongoing thing. It's a slow thing because he's got a day job. Over the last 2 years, independently, there's now a lot of HDMI capture devices for sale on the market. The problem is Linux support. There isn't Linux support for the most part. It would be really nice to be able to have something that works on a Raspberry Pi, because Raspberry Pi is cheap. It doesn't use much power. It doesn't take up much space in a backpack. It would be absolutely awesome if we could have a Raspberry Pi with HDMI in, bundled with a camera. That would be cheap and awesome, and I'd really like to see that, but it depends. There was a project to get an HDMI in on a Raspberry Pi, but that looks like it failed. It may rise again, maybe down the track.
Yeah, there's some issues with the hardware on even
some
the Raspberry Pi 2.
Right.
Yeah, there's some issues about the way the hardware works. I have seen the specific project.
Yeah, I had a look at it. There was it can't take an arbitrary video stream to compress it on the fly using the built-in hardware. You would have to do it completely external and take a already compressed stream. So that's why they couldn't do it. It was really strange that they could get a prototype for that and not notice that didn't work. So I have a feeling that the Kickstarter campaign was a little bit of rubbish. Like they hadn't actually gone as far as they were claiming they had. Otherwise it would have been evident. But anyway, Raspberry Pi 2 with something that plugs into it that does HDMI capture and compression would be fantastic. Until something is available, we're kind of stuck, because without the hardware capture, we don't have the video. And then the flip side, that's the software, which is GST Streamer. That seems like it's actually moving along. But
yeah, a lot of development happened.
You wanted to make a comment about that? Yeah.
But there are some very good video for Linux cameras. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Video for Linux. Now, I wanted to make a mention about video for Linux or any other video input that GStreamer can make use of, because then that can go into GST switch instead of DV switch. The issues are around the time it takes to convert the original format into whatever format you're using for GST switch, because you've got to say it's 720p or 1080p. Anytime you're doing conversion, it introduces latency, and sometimes that latency is so great your lips are moving half a second after the sound, and that is horrible. It really has to be at 1 to 2 frames maximum, and that's a problem if you've got to do video conversion. So video for Linux is a option, but with video conversion, the experience is just not very good.
GStreamer can do that much quicker than how we're doing it.
Yep.
And I believe there's a DV source video for Linux, which is I think Python GStreamer shim that Tim has submitted and is part of the DV source packages now. I've seen it, I just haven't had a chance to play with it.
Yeah, he's said that there's a couple of things I've done to try to make that quick. I haven't had first-hand experience on it. I just wanted to add just in general about EventStreamr, since I was involved with it slightly differently, back with LCA 2014, but not 2015, because I haven't had time. But it's a bit of a strange thing. People don't actually realize they need EventStreamr, and people are more interested in a specific project like DV Switch, where you're mixing multiple video channels, or GST Switch, where you're mixing HDMI input. Because the fact is, if you're doing that, you've got multiple devices, multiple computers, networks, and all these processes running which are subject to failure. Now, one of the reasons why commercial video capture companies have, like you were saying, racks with hardware, and it's all set up, ready to go. You just plug stuff in. Not only that, but that hardware, you're paying huge amount of money, and it just works. It just works. You don't have to worry about it. We don't have that luxury of spending tens of thousands of dollars on hardware, and either do other lugs around the world or the conferences. And part of the appeal of doing something like this is we can use commodity hardware, open source software, and get something to work. But the bit that we saw as being critical after helping out with LCA 2013 was all the failure points, and everything just failed all the time. And you cannot expect a volunteer who's had 5 minutes training to understand anything about the software stack. All they should need to know about is the camera, or watching an audio board to make sure the audio levels are correct. And so EventStreamr takes care of all the rest of the management. And I reckon it's a very exciting project, because if we do this right, if the documentation's there, if people can install it, we have some recommended kits, like let's say like a laptop with Firewire stuff. That's very difficult to obtain now, but if we had HDMI with a Raspberry Pi and people could replicate it, I think the project's exciting, because everyone is going to start to use it. Everyone, because it's going to be easy and it's going to solve a lot of problems. So I want to thank Leon for all the effort he's put into it, because he's certainly put a lot more into it than I have. But it's an exciting project. I wish I had more time to spend on it. But anyway, thanks, Leon.
Yeah, and and there are other projects that attempt to solve this issue. One of them I saw was Matterhorn, but a lot of them seem to be aimed at a very fixed situation, like a big university, where all the config is fixed, so it can be a little complicated to get going, because once you get it going, like any good open source solution, they can be a little hard to get going, but they just work, and they just stay working. And so the solution I came up with was out of frustration of not having anything else that fitted the scale from what we're doing right now to what we do at a conference. And to have that solution where a lug can run it and then be confident that, hey, a conference is just more of these, more laptops. It's not different software and different configuration and different problems. It's all the same. So you can get confident, like we did, running our local lug, to scale that out to a large conference. I don't think we can capture the audio, so I won't bother playing a video, but if you go look on YouTube for Pia War's Fight the War from LCA 2014, it gives a really good sort of display or demonstration of what can happen when your volunteers aren't scared of breaking the equipment. Because what they did with 2 cameras and no communication was amazing. Like, it looked like an actual film clip. And it was just a bunch of volleys and Pia and some second-hand equipment playing a bit of music, and it was amazing. We sort of caught the start of it in the Tavnock, and then quickly huddled around with the nearest computer with speakers and just stood there, mouths open at what we were seeing, because we were like, wow, it actually worked. This is what it's all about. So I think, is there any more questions? I think that's me.